Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Good Shepherd. It's so good to be here with you worshiping and for those joining us online. My name is Steve Girard, and this morning we are starting a brand new sermon series from the select storytelling of Jesus. We call these stories parables. Now, if someone were to press you to define Jesus or to describe Jesus in one or two words or three words, how would you respond? Yeah, you might say creator or redeemer or wise teacher or Emmanuel, Lord of Lords, King of Kings. There are many, many descriptive words that you could use to describe Jesus, and I suppose the list possibly could be endless. Throughout Jesus' public ministry, he told many stories about how he wanted you to remember him. Jesus understood something about the human condition in that we understand important truths. We understand important things better if we learn them through an interesting story. Jesus understood that about us. These stories not only told us something about Jesus, they also taught us something about ourselves, that the human needs someone and some things to thrive in life. And these parables also teach us these deep truths. Of the 30 or more stories that Jesus told as recorded in the gospel, there are 3 stories that are found in Luke's gospel, chapter 15, that are grouped together: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. And in these 3 parables, it tells a story about someone or something that is lost, and this person or thing is found. And obviously, Jesus is the central character in these stories. And throughout these 3 parables, Jesus reveals something very important to us about his character. He loves us beyond anything that we could imagine. There isn't any length that he will go to try and help us. Jesus is not this angry, vengeful God just waiting for you to mess up so he can judge you. He displays his love and affection for you day after day after day. And these 3 parables tell the story about that aspect of who Jesus is. Now today, we're going to look at the parable of the Good Shepherd. Now, what is the setting for the Good Shepherd parable? Well, we need to go back 1 chapter in Luke to chapter 14 to understand the setting in which Jesus told this story. Jesus had just finished eating dinner with a Pharisee. Now, the Pharisees were the leading religious leaders of the day, and they considered themselves at the very top of society. They were the most educated, they were the most eloquent, they were the best writers, and they considered everyone else below them. Jesus did spend time with the Pharisees trying to teach them things. Now, at the end of this meal, Jesus walks out of the house of the Pharisee, and waiting for him is a group of tax collectors and sinners. Now, one aspect of this parable that is not talked about very much, and it's this: the Pharisee or Pharisees who had dinner with Jesus also came out of the house. They probably heard the commotion of this large group of sinners and tax collectors that wanted to hear something from Jesus, that wanted to be taught by Jesus. And they came out to see what the commotion was all about. And when Jesus taught the parable of the Good Shepherd, they also heard the story, because the story was certainly about the sinners and tax collectors, but the story also had an element about an aspect of the Pharisees' life that Jesus wanted to teach them. You see, that the Pharisees viewed the sinners and tax collectors as a group of individuals that was irredeemable, that they were permanently lost, that they were not worthy of their time. And Jesus understood that's how they thought about this group that was in front of them. And Jesus wanted to communicate something very, very important to them about their attitude. The other aspect of this particular parable that I think is really important is that it gives us a glimpse, just a snapshot picture of what Jesus wanted us to know about the kingdom of God, how he wanted us to understand how kingdom values actually worked. So, let's read the story of the Good Shepherd as found in Luke chapter 15. And I'm going to be reading today from the New Living Translation. I really like the way that this translator handled the verse. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such despicable people, even eating with them. So Jesus used this illustration. If you had 100 sheep and one of them strayed away and was lost in the wilderness, wouldn't you leave the 99 others to go and search for the one that was lost until you found it? And then, would you joyfully carry it home on your shoulders? When you arrived, you would call together your friends and neighbors to rejoice with you because your lost sheep was found. In the same way, heaven will be happier over one lost sinner who returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. So, Jesus tells this story. Now, risking the chance for you to correct me, I'm going to venture to say that not many of you have actually had the privilege of watching a shepherd work his flock. I had the privilege of living in Europe for 4 years when I was in the Air Force. The base that I was stationed at is now closed. It closed down at the end of the Cold War. And the area of the base in which I worked was guarded by a double row of barbed wire fence. They had guard towers, and I kid you not, the guards had 50 caliber machine guns in their towers. The grounds were patrolled by German Shepherd dogs and their handlers, and there was some pretty sophisticated electronic monitoring going on. You needed a top secret clearance to even get into this area. Now, it's been decades since I've been there, but through the marvels of Google, don't you love Google? You can find anything on Google. I actually found 2 pictures of where I was stationed. So this first picture shows the building in which I worked. I spent years working in that building. It brought back a flood of emotion because of the positive experience that I had. I worked with a man in that building by the name of Barney Ragsdale. And Barney was my first mentor in life. But the thing I want you to pay attention to is the grass covering this building. Now, I also found a photograph of the general storage area. If you'll put that up, please. There were 46 storage bunkers that covered 10 acres. And as you can imagine, cutting the grass, keeping it cut in the spring and summer was quite a chore. And because you needed a security clearance to get into this area, the job of cutting the grass fell to people like me and the men that I worked with, so we had to do our job plus cut the grass. Well, the Soviet Union was pretty nasty at that time, and we were on alert quite a bit. And the grass cutting didn't get done, and the grass is pretty high. So what they decided to do was to bring in a flock of sheep to graze this area and take care of the grass. So a local shepherd was located. His name was Kenneth. And Kenneth was a highly decorated World War II veteran. And it was really easy for the Air Force security people to give him a top secret clearance and a security badge to get into this area. So he brought his flock in here 170 sheep. I got to watch him work his flock for 3 years. You could tell that his sheep loved him, and you could tell that he loved his sheep. He talked to his sheep all day, every day. Kenneth was a beautiful tenor. He would sing to his sheep. And yes, occasionally, one sheep, for whatever reason, would just start to wander away and walk away from the main herd. And Kenneth would gently and lovingly just walk over and gently bring that sheep back to the herd. I actually watch him do this maybe 3 or 4 times over the years. So when Jesus told this story about a shepherd that went after a sheep that walked away, the group of people that actually heard this story being told would automatically say, oh yeah, that happens. I know that happens. See, Jesus was telling a story about something that the men and women who were listening to the story would understand. He really understood his audience. Jesus used things very, very familiar to the people that were listening so that they would focus on the story rather than trying to figure out the verbiage. You know, Jesus told story and parables about, landowners and people who rented land and harvests and weed and birds and bushes and money, everything that they would encounter in everyday life. These were the things that Jesus talked about as he was communicating his story. Let's go back to the parable. It's important to remember that Jesus probably never wrote anything during his lifetime. He communicated everything that he wanted us to know about him and his kingdom through teaching and stories. That's why the way that he grouped the stories together, that's why he understood the audience that he was speaking to would understand the story at that particular time. In this story, it was really simple. This parable is about a man, a shepherd, about a flock of sheep, and some friends. Very, very simple element, and it's a very, very simple story. Now, the crux of the story is this. The Pharisees believed that Jesus was spending too much time with sinners and tax collectors, that he shouldn't do that. Teachers don't do that. He even ate with them. He should be spending more time with the favored group, the Pharisees. And over time, as Jesus spent more and more time with the sinners and tax collectors, the anger of the Pharisees would grow to the point at the end of the gospel story, as they say, we know how this story ends. Well, they had him killed. That's the level of anger that was building during Jesus' lifetime. Now, the story that he was going to tell was such that there would leave no doubt in anyone's mind who the shepherd was and who the sheep were, and the relationship between the two. So, the thing that Jesus wanted to communicate, I think in a very deep way, is that the shepherd's love for the flock was so deep, so rich, so meaningful, that the shepherd would do just about anything to protect his flock. That's Jesus' relationship with us. He loves us so much that he is willing to do anything to help us through life, regardless of where we're at, what we're doing, what we're thinking, the bad roads we've walked down, the poor decisions that we make. As the saying goes, there's nothing can separate us from the love of God. Now, the life of a shepherd in Judea was really dangerous. I don't know if you know that. It was pretty thankless. Shepherds were considered to be a disenfranchised part of society. They were at the lowest rung of the society. Pharisees thought themselves to be up here. Now, the shepherd was out in the field 365 days a year. Rain, sun, shine, heat, cold. He never took a day off. And beyond that, this is an actual picture of the Judean countryside. There wasn't much grass. It was hard for a shepherd to tend his flock in this location. And on top of that, there were wild animals that wanted to eat the sheep. That was just a fact of life. That was one of the shepherd's primary duties, was to protect the flock. That was the life of a shepherd. So that's the setting for which the shepherd worked. Now, Jesus is saying to us in this parable that he is the good shepherd in this story. How many of you have read the Gospel of John? Oh, I encourage you to do that. Get into chapter 10. It's one of my favorite chapters. See, Jesus comes outright and says, I am the good shepherd. I love my flock so much that I'm going to lay down my life for my flock. There's nothing that can separate me from you. And when one of you strays away like the sheep in the parable, I'm going to go after you. I've had the privilege of working with adults over the years with issues of spiritual development. And as I've formed a friendship with them and a bond of trust has been formed, they have confessed to me that they are currently, or at some point in their life, they've wandered away from their faith. It's just a fact of life. And this period of wandering away lasts for maybe a week, a month. For some it was years. But the good part of the story is that they found that the life that they were living was so empty, it didn't have any answers, that they wanted to come back and live out a robust faith life. And that when they did return, the joy that they had in their relationship with Jesus was multiplied. So, being the curious kind of fellow that I am, I usually ask them a couple of questions, and I'm going to tell you the questions that I ask. And I want to couch this in a way that you understand I'm not being disrespectful in any regard to Jesus, his kingdom, God. I want to be very, very careful with this, okay? So I asked them, well, how did you know that Jesus wanted you to come back? And secondly, how did Jesus communicate to you that he wanted you to come back, just like the lost sheep that wandered away that the shepherd went after? And they generally stand there or sit there with this blank look on their face, and they don't know how to answer that. So I prompt them and I say, well, did Jesus personally appear to you and ask you to come back, that he loves you and wanted you to come back? And they say, no, not really. I said, did you hear Jesus' audible voice? To come back, that I want you back. And they say, no, he didn't do that. I said, well, how did you know that Jesus would accept you back? That's where you come in. Have you ever had the experience of doing what I consider to be a mundane task. It could be as easy as cutting the grass or cleaning the house or washing the dishes or playing sports, walking. It could be anything when a person's name pops into your memory. Bob, Mary, Steve, anybody. And you start thinking about them. And you're wondering to yourself, boy, I wonder what happened. I haven't seen them in months. I wonder what's going on in their life. Maybe I should call them. Maybe I should ask them to go out to coffee or maybe lunch and catch up on things going on in their life. My question to you is, where do thoughts like that come from? Are they random? Is it because of the indigestion that you had from the pizza that you ate the night before? Jesus did something amazing in his life just about at every turn. And right before Jesus ascended into heaven, he said a couple of things to us. And the amazing thing that he said was, hey, look, as you go through life, go make disciples. Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, takes that idea even further, and he says that we are ambassadors of Christ here on earth. You see, we are the voice, we are the hands, we are the feet of Jesus. This is how he advances his kingdom, through us. And occasionally, he will ask us to reach out to someone who has wandered away and gently bring them back. I've actually had someone say to me, well, yeah, that happened, but I didn't particularly like the person I was supposed to go visit. I know the lifestyle they were leading. They were in a horrible place. They were doing horribly sinful things that I disapproved of, and God was asking me to go to that person and bring them back. How do you think that made me feel? See, if you're being asked to go back to someone and talk to them that you like, who was a friend, it's real easy to go back to them. But if you're being asked to go back to someone and gently guide them back that you loathe, I think that shows the highest form of love that you have for them, and you recognize that it's God that's asking you to do this. What joy there is on heaven and earth when someone that is lost does come back. My question to you is this: have you ever been used by God that way? There's several ways that men and women wander away. Sometimes it's what I call benign. For example, they find Sunday church service irrelevant, so they stop going to church on Sunday. Maybe they've lost their confidence that prayer works, or maybe they've found a sports events on Sunday that they feel is more important than a relationship, or they stop talking to their friends, or they start doing something that pulls them away from their faith. And it happens slowly and gradually. It happens one day, and then it turns into a week, and then it turns into a year, and maybe a decade later, they're still away. For others, I grant that it could come from a tremendous shock in their life. There's studies have been shown that horrible things that happen to people can actually pull them toward God. It can happen, but it also can pull you away from God. Horrible things like, a death of a loved one. maybe you got that cancer diagnosis. Maybe you lost an important job. Maybe you're struggling with your marriage, or, for heaven's sake, trying to raise teenagers in today's society. And this pulls you away. But what this parable is telling us is that while you are away, Jesus is searching for you. Jesus is searching for the person that has strayed. He will do that relentlessly throughout that person's lifetime. Nothing can hinder Jesus from searching for the lost one. You cannot out-sin God's love for you. See, God's core value, Jesus' core value, is displayed in this parable, and that's love. He loves us. He laid down his life for us. That's how much he loves us. And if you, me, anyone, happens to stray for a long or a short period of time, we know that he is the good shepherd that will continually go after us. Now, in this parable, something good happens. The shepherd finds the lost sheep, throws the sheep over his shoulders, which is a sign of love, and brings the sheep home. In real life, sometimes there is not a happy ending, and I'll grant you that. See, Jesus may say to you, I want you to make a connection with Mary or Bob and try to bring them back, and in doing so, they say to you, nope, not interested. Get out of my face. I don't want to talk to you. Go. If that happens to you, that's on them. It's not on you. You were faithful in what Jesus was asking you to do, but know this, that while they are still away, he is still searching for them. He may use you again to try and bring them back, or he may use someone else to try and bring them back. The important part here is that you were faithful in doing what Jesus was asking you to do. Now, the other aspect of this parable is that we have to look at this parable through the eyes of what we call the original hearers. That was the group of sinners and tax collectors who lived in real life, in real time, and the Pharisees. If we try to apply 2023 logic to this parable, I'm going to grant you it makes no sense. Figure this out. You've got 100 sheep, and one of them starts to walk away. Now you, as the shepherd, in 2023, what are you going to do? Are you going to leave the 99 unprotected to go after the one? Or are you going to do a cost-benefit analysis and say, hey, look, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to protect the 99. I'm going to make sure that they are okay. And if that dumb sheep wants to walk away, let him go. I can sustain a 1% loss and still make money. But that's not the value of what's going on here. And the original hearer of this parable would not process it like that. See, the average size flock of sheep in Jesus' day was about 25. A shepherd couldn't handle, in those conditions, a flock bigger than that. So when Jesus starts out by saying, hey, there was a flock of 100 sheep. See, the original hearers of this parable would have automatically thought and understood, that represents probably 3, 4, or 5 flocks and a corresponding number of shepherds. So that when one sheep from that flock walks away, the shepherd responsible for that particular sheep would say to the other shepherds, hey, I'm going to go after this dunce over here. Can you protect my sheep over here? And they would correspondingly say, sure, yeah, we'll do that while you're gone. Think about the name of our church. Why do we call it Good Shepherd? Is that something that just somebody made up? See, this flock, everyone that belongs to Good Shepherd, is being taken care of by shepherds that love us and are willing to do anything to help us. Did you know that occasionally one of our flock walks away? Did you? Oh, I know you have a hard time believing that. And you know what? We go after them. We make sure that they know that they are loved, that we want them back and Jesus wants them back, and we create the path for them to come back, even after they have done despicable things. But while we're going after the one that does walk away, guess what happens here at Good Shepherd? We have a pastoral staff and some wonderful volunteers that protect us, that protect the flock here while we're out looking for the one. That's the model that Jesus has informed us that he would like us to follow while we are advancing his kingdom in this era, in this year, this week, this day. The great success that was had was displayed by the shepherd when he said, "Rejoice with me, what I have found, what I have lost was found." Just as that one sheep was important to the shepherd that went out and went after him, the other point to this story is that Jesus is telling us that everyone, including you, is important to him. There is nothing that you can do to separate yourself from his love. He may not like a particular lifestyle that you're in. He may not like the particular decisions that you've made to get you into the condition that you're in, but he wants you back. And he's out there looking for you when you do wander. He cares for everyone. Now, here's the contrast. The Pharisees, the religious leaders, are listening to this parable. See, what Jesus wanted to do was turn around and look at them and say, did you get it? See, you're the ones, you're the religious leaders that should be out looking for the lost ones. You're the religious leaders who have been trained to take care of the sinners and the tax collectors. You're the ones who should be taking care of those less fortunate, the ill, the sick, the maimed, the ones who can't take care of themselves, and you won't even talk to them. I mean, this was an indictment to them, their lifestyle, and their thinking. I can't imagine the look on their faces when Jesus was telling this story, because he left no doubt in anyone's mind who the people were in this relationship. So what do we make of this parable that has been around for us for 2,000 years? Is it applicable for us today? Here's some ideas that I would like to leave you with. Jesus assumes full responsibility for everyone. Not only does he assume responsibility for his creation, he demonstrates his depth of love for you each and every day. God wants you to rejoice with him when there are kingdom victories. When someone that is lost returns, it's time to celebrate. God wants something far more from us than what I call blind compliance. See, that's what the Pharisees did. There were over 600 laws that the Pharisees had to follow in order to remain pure. And they were very, very, very proud to tell people that they followed all 600. But what Jesus was saying to them, you're missing the point. of what I want from you. What I want from you is a transformed life. What I want for you is to understand the love that I have for you that is true transformational, that doesn't just blindly follow. And finally, Jesus had a bias toward the downtrodden, the sick, the poor, the less fortunate, so much so that he ate with them, he taught them, and he loved them. And we too must take care of the opportunities that we have placed before us to go after the ones that society says are at the lowest. Would you pray with me, please? Jesus, we are so grateful that you have shown and demonstrated to us the true love that you have, the way that you care for us, and the way that you follow us through life. Jesus, we are profoundly thankful that you are here with us today to walk beside us regardless of our circumstance. And we are so thankful and grateful that if someone were to ask us today to describe you in one or two words, we could say with confidence that indeed you are the Good Shepherd. Amen.